John was a hard-working mechanic who had seen his fair share of difficult days. One rainy afternoon, while driving home after a long shift, he noticed a woman stranded on the side of the road with her car. Without hesitation, he pulled over and offered to help. Little did John know this simple act of kindness would change his life forever. Just 2 days later, a helicopter landed right in front of his house. "Hi everyone, welcome to Life in Pieces Tales. Today, I'm excited to share a new story with you." John was a man of simple means. He worked long hours at the local garage and rarely took time off. His days were spent fixing engines, tuning up cars, and helping customers who came in with their vehicle problems. Life wasn't easy, but John had grown used to the routine. He didn't expect much, just enough to pay the bills and keep the lights on at his small house on the edge of town. One rainy evening, John was driving home from another exhausting day at work. The rain was pouring heavily, and the roads were slick and dangerous. As he navigated the wet streets, he noticed something up ahead. There, on the side of the road, a car was pulled over with its hazard lights flashing. In the dim light, he could see a woman standing next to the vehicle, looking helpless as she held her coat tightly around herself. John knew he couldn't just drive past. He slowed down and pulled his truck to the side of the road. Stepping out into the rain, he walked over to the woman and asked if she needed help. She nodded, explaining that her car wouldn't start. John quickly assessed the situation, realizing that it wasn't a big problem, just a dead battery. He offered to jump-start her car with his truck. As the rain continued to fall, John worked swiftly, attaching the cables and getting her car running again. The woman, drenched but grateful, thanked him repeatedly, offering to pay for his help. But John waved it off with a smile, saying it was nothing. He was just happy she could get home safely. She introduced herself as Sarah and asked if there was anything she could do to repay him. John simply smiled again and said, "No, it's all right. Just pay it forward one day." Sarah smiled warmly, but something about the way she looked at John was different, like she was thinking about something deeper. With a grateful wave, she drove off into the rain, leaving John to wonder if he'd ever see her again. 2 days passed, and John had almost forgotten about the rainy encounter. He was back to his usual routine at the garage, fixing cars, handling customers, and making sure everything ran smoothly. But that morning, something unusual happened. John was in the middle of changing the oil on a truck when his phone rang. It was his neighbor, sounding frantic. "John, you need to come home right now," his neighbor said. "There's a helicopter in front of your house." Confused, John wiped his hands on a rag and rushed out of the garage. His mind was racing. What could possibly be happening? As he drove home, a mix of curiosity and concern filled his thoughts. When John finally reached his street, he couldn't believe his eyes. There, right in front of his modest house, was a large, sleek helicopter. Several people in suits stood around as if they had been waiting for him. John parked his truck and approached the group cautiously. Before he could say anything, one of the men stepped forward and introduced himself. "Mr. Thompson, we're here on behalf of someone you helped 2 days ago, in the rain," the man said, with a slight smile. John was taken aback. "You mean Sarah?" he asked, remembering the woman whose car he had fixed. The man nodded and handed him a letter. John opened it, his hands shaking slightly. The letter simply read, "Thank you for your kindness. It meant more than you know. Please come with us." John stared at the paper in disbelief. His heart raced as he tried to make sense of what was happening. Why would Sarah send a helicopter? What could she possibly want? John's thoughts were spinning as he looked at the helicopter and the people waiting for him. He had no idea what was going on, but something told him that this wasn't just a thank you for jump-starting a car. After a moment of hesitation, John nodded, still unsure, but curious. The man gestured toward the helicopter, and John followed. As they boarded, John couldn't help but wonder how his simple act of kindness had led to this. The helicopter took off smoothly, lifting them above the small town. John stared out the window, trying to figure out where they were headed. It wasn't long before the helicopter began to descend toward a large estate on the outskirts of town, a place John had never been to before. The mansion below was surrounded by lush gardens, and the sight of it made John's jaw drop. This wasn't just any home. This was something out of a dream. The helicopter landed, and John was led inside. Everything felt surreal. The house was grand, with marble floors and high ceilings. The man who had given John the letter guided him through the halls until they reached a large room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens. There, standing by the window, was Sarah. John blinked in surprise. Sarah looked different from the woman he had met in the rain. She was dressed elegantly, standing tall and composed. As she turned to face him, she smiled warmly, but there was a certain seriousness in her expression. "John," she began, "I've been waiting for you." John took a step forward, still trying to process everything. "Sarah, what is all this? Why the helicopter? Why am I here?" Sarah's smile softened. "You helped me when you didn't have to, when no one else stopped. That simple act meant more to me than you can imagine. You see, I'm not just Sarah. I'm the owner of this estate, and I have more resources than most people realize. But that day in the rain, I was just a person in need, and you came to help without asking for anything in return." John listened carefully, still unsure where this was leading. Sarah continued, "You reminded me of something important that day, that kindness is a gift. It's something you can't buy, no matter how much money you have. And that's why I wanted to do something for you, to show my gratitude in a way that could change your life, the way you changed mine, even if you didn't realize it." John was speechless. All he had done was fix her car, and now he was standing in a mansion, talking to a woman whose life seemed far more complex than he had imagined. "I don't understand," John said quietly. "Why me? Why go through all this trouble?" Sarah stepped closer, her expression sincere. "Because you didn't hesitate. You didn't ask for anything in return. People like you deserve to be recognized. And now, I want to offer you something that could change your life, but only if you're willing to accept it." John's heart raced. "What do you mean?" he asked cautiously. Sarah walked over to a small table in the room. On it was a thick envelope and a set of keys. She picked them up and handed them to John. "These," she said, "represent a fresh start. The envelope contains enough money for you to live comfortably for the rest of your life. And the keys are to a car that's parked outside, one far better than your old truck. But more than that, I want to offer you something else." John was stunned. He stared at the envelope in disbelief. His hands trembled as he held it. "I don't know what to say," he whispered. The idea of financial security, of having a way out of the daily grind he had known for so long, was overwhelming. But Sarah wasn't finished. "There's more," she said softly. "I have a position available, working with me. I could use someone with your skills and your heart. It would be a chance for you to leave behind your old life and step into something new." John felt a wave of emotions. He hadn't expected any of this when he stopped to help a stranger in the rain. Now, he was being offered a life he never imagined. He took a deep breath and looked at Sarah. "This is unbelievable," he said. "But I don't know if I can accept all of this. It's too much." Sarah shook her head gently. "It's not too much. It's exactly what you deserve. I see the kind of person you are, John. You're humble, hardworking, and kind. People like you often go unnoticed, but not this time. This time, your kindness is being rewarded." John stood there, still unsure of what to do. The offer was incredible, but it was also overwhelming. I need time to think," he said finally. Sarah nodded, understanding. "Take all the time you need. The offer will stand whenever you're ready." John left the mansion that day with the envelope and the keys, but his mind was still spinning. The helicopter ride back to his house felt like a blur. Once home, he sat in his small, familiar living room, staring at the thick envelope on the table in front of him. He hadn't opened it yet. Somehow, he needed to process everything that had just happened. A few days passed, and John returned to his routine at the garage. But things felt different now. He couldn't stop thinking about Sarah's offer, the money, the job. It was all so much more than he had ever dreamed of, and yet something about it felt almost too good to be true. One evening, as he sat on his porch after a long day of work, John pulled out the envelope and opened it. Inside was a check, an amount so large that it took his breath away. He had never seen so many zeros in his life. Along with the check was a handwritten note from Sarah. The note read, "John, this is just the beginning. Your kindness changed my life that day, and I hope this helps to change yours. But remember, the choice is yours. You can keep going as you always have, or you can take a step into something new. Either way, I'll always be grateful for what you did for me." John sat back, feeling a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. The money could change everything for him. No more struggling to pay bills, no more long hours at the garage just to get by. He could finally have the security he had always dreamed of. But the offer to work for Sarah, that was something else entirely. It was a chance to leave behind the life he knew and start fresh, doing something new and meaningful. The decision weighed on him for days. He thought about his life, his struggles, and the simple act of kindness that had led him here. And then, one morning, he woke up with a sense of clarity. John decided it was time to take a chance. He called the number on the card Sarah had given him and accepted her offer. The helicopter returned a few days later, this time not just as a symbol of gratitude, but as the beginning of a new chapter in John's life. He left behind the garage, the long hours, and the constant worry about making ends meet. Now, working alongside Sarah, John found a new sense of purpose. The work was challenging but rewarding, and for the first time in years, he felt like his life was moving in a new direction. Sarah's gratitude had opened doors he never thought possible, and John learned that sometimes a small act of kindness could lead to the most extraordinary changes. As he stood in front of the mansion one evening, watching the sun set over the gardens, John couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. His life had transformed in ways he never imagined, all because he had stopped to help a stranger in the rain. And now, as the cool evening breeze brushed against his face, John realized something even more important. Kindness has a ripple effect, and you never know where it might lead. Loved this story? Tap that like button and subscribe to Life in Pieces Tales for more. Let us know how this story made you feel with a single word in the comments.